Okay, so today we're diving into something uh, pretty interesting. We're going to be talking about wealth
Okay.
and the idea that one person's wealth can actually have an impact on a lot of people,
Hmm.
not just those in their immediate circle,
Yeah.
It reminds me of that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
But is wealth really that tide? And if it is, who's steering the boat? And more importantly, who might get left behind?
Well, it's definitely an interesting analogy to think about.
Yeah.
And I think a key part of that analogy is that wealth isn't static. It's always moving around. It's being invested and spent and donated. And each of those actions ends up creating a ripple effect.
That's right. And our source material for this deep dive actually goes into how creating wealth can lead to a whole bunch of good things.
Mm-hmm.
Starting with probably the most obvious one, jobs. So think about it. An entrepreneur, right, who makes it big, starts a company, suddenly they're employing hundreds, maybe even thousands of people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those jobs create income, which then flows back into the local economy. Employees spend money at local businesses, they invest in their kids' education. It's really like a chain reaction, like when you toss a pebble in a pond.
Right, but doesn't that assume everyone's got a boat that's ready to be lifted by that tide? What about folks who are already struggling? Do they just automatically benefit from someone else's success?
That's a really important question, and it touches on some pretty complex issues. But one thing we can't forget is charitable giving.
Hmm.
The source highlights how many people who become wealthy end up becoming big philanthropists. They support all kinds of causes, from the arts to healthcare.
That's true, but even philanthropy has so many different aspects to it, right? It's not just about handing out money. It's about how that money's being used, what the giver wants to achieve with it. Are they trying to make big changes in the system, or are they focusing on smaller, more targeted impacts?
Right. Some philanthropists might want to tackle the root causes of inequality. They might fund programs that address poverty or try to improve access to education. But then you have others who are really passionate about specific areas, like maybe funding medical research or protecting the environment.
I see.
And their choices usually reflect their personal values and what they believe will make the world a better place.
So we've got wealth creation leading to jobs, boosting the economy, and potentially leading to some really positive changes through philanthropy. But the source material goes even further. It suggests that the benefits of wealth can even reach people who aren't directly connected to the wealthy individual. It's like there's this invisible web of influence.
It's this fascinating concept, isn't it? I mean, think about networking. A wealthy person's connections can open doors for others in their circle, right? Maybe introducing them to investors or mentors, or even just exposing them to new ideas and ways of thinking.
Yeah, it's like if you're in a pool and someone's doing Olympic level laps, you might pick up on a few techniques just by being in the same water.
Ah,
But you still got to put in the work to actually learn how to swim.
exactly. And it's not just formal networking either. The source mentions how seeing a wealthy entrepreneur succeed might inspire a young person to start learning to code, or maybe think about a career in technology. That kind of inspiration, it can be really powerful, especially for someone who might not have considered those options before.
It's that whole my cup runneth over concept, like
Yeah.
that abundance spilling out and affecting those around them. And one example that really struck me was about a wealthy family's child sharing their educational resources with a friend who didn't have as many opportunities.
Mm,
Even a simple act like that can create a ripple effect.
absolutely. These small acts of generosity can grow into something much bigger, but it makes you wonder, does this kind of individual generosity really scale up? Can one person's wealth really make a difference for society as a whole?
That's the question, isn't it? It leads us to think about the larger societal impacts of wealth. The source brings up the point that wealthy people, through their investments, can actually fuel innovation and economic growth.
Hmm.
They might be the first ones to support a startup that goes on to develop some life-changing technology.
Right, and that's where venture capital comes in. Basically, you have wealthy individuals or funds investing in companies that are just starting out. They're taking on a lot of risk, hoping for big returns. If those companies are successful, they create jobs, generate wealth, and potentially transform entire industries.
And we can't forget those who donate to things like public parks, libraries, museums. Those benefit everyone, no matter their income level. It's about building a community that thrives.
That's true. But it's also important to remember that not every investment is the same. Some investments mainly benefit the investor, while others really focus on making a positive impact on society. That's where we hear terms like impact investing, where the goal is to get a financial return while also doing some good for society or the environment.
That's where things get a little more complicated. right? It's not as simple as saying more wealth automatically equals a better world. And the source acknowledges that there are potential downsides to wealth, too.
Yeah, and we can't avoid the topic of wealth disparity. When you have a situation where a very small number of people hold most of the wealth, it can create social and economic imbalances, and that can make it even harder for people to climb up the economic ladder.
It's like some boats are getting bigger and faster while others are struggling just to stay afloat. And that kind of disparity can lead to resentment, social unrest. It's not exactly a recipe for a happy society.
Absolutely. And it brings up some important questions about the responsibility of people who have a lot of wealth. How are they using their resources? Are their investments benefiting society as a whole, or are they just making themselves richer?
And beyond investments, there's also the question of political influence. Wealth can be a powerful tool to shape policies and laws, and those decisions can have a huge impact on everyone.
That's right. So the bottom line isn't that wealth is inherently good or bad. It's that the impact of wealth really depends on how it was acquired, how it's managed, and how it's used. The choices individuals make and the systems we have in place to regulate those choices, they have enormous consequences.
Yeah, lots to think about here. It's not just about the money itself. It's about what we choose to do with it. And for me, one of the key takeaways from this deep dive is that wealth, when it's used responsibly, can be a really powerful force for positive change.
Right.
It can create opportunities, drive innovation, and contribute to a more just and thriving society.
Definitely. It leaves us with some big questions, though. How do we encourage a culture where people see wealth creation as being connected to a sense of responsibility for the well-being of others? How do we create systems that make sure the benefits of economic growth are shared more fairly?
Those are some weighty questions.
Yeah.
And we've only just scratched the surface of this really complex topic. But that's what these deep dives are for, right?
Right.
To keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those conversations going.
Exactly.
So keep thinking about it, folks, and we'll catch you next time for another deep dive.
Sounds good.